Welcome to Finding the Frame. I'm your host, Xander Miller. This is the show where we practice discernment through dialogue. This is done by having conversations where we discern the truth, and we do so in the spirit of charity. So let's get to it. Today I have with me Angel SanMartin,
Yes.
and yeah. And he got my attention and many other people's attentions by putting out a video where he cast off his anonymity on X, formerly known as Twitter, and told us about and stood up as a teacher and a person who's sort of against the woke indoctrination. So, uh, welcome, Angel. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Well, I mean, you said it. You said it pretty much yourself. I'm just pretty much a random teacher who decided that I don't like radical ideology and I want to speak out against it. That's pretty much as far as I've gotten with my whatever plan that I may or may not have.
All right, cool. And I'm excited to talk to you. I think like before we were talking back and forth, and you're like, oh, you the last few guests I've had like have been sort of like big philosophical idea guys, but I'm interested to talk to some people who are really on the front lines of this as well, because it's seldom to find where we find teachers who are willing to speak up and talk about like what's it like in that environment, because it's very easy to just sort of like from the outside to just sort of look at the institution and think everyone inside it is involved and of the
The
same like
same,
mind,
yeah.
right? But the reality is that there's people who are really struggling
No, there's a lot
in
of
there.
diversity. It's just if you're on one side, you can speak loudly and proclaim pretty much whatever you want, and if you disagree, you can't do it publicly for the most part.
Yeah, yeah. So it's a bit of illusion, and I think that like there's a lot of things about uh wokeness that involves illusions. So let's tear some of those down. I'm I'm curious. Okay, so just to give some more framing work as where you are as a teacher. Um, so how long have you been a teacher? I think you mentioned it in the video. It's
So I've been in the teaching profession for 10 years.
okay.
The first three were kind of like virtual school, part-time work here and there, substituting, kind of
Hmm.
trying to find a position really, because especially as a social studies history teacher, that's the hardest position to find in schools.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. It,
Y-
and so after those 3 years, then for 7 years, I went to two different schools, a private school and a charter school in South
mhm.
Florida, and I taught history, mostly middle school, mostly sixth grade U.S.
Okay.
history, but I taught civics. I taught both versions of world history, eighth and ninth, a few English classes and science classes as well in the private school because it was very small. So I
Okay.
wore a lot of hats.
That's cool. Okay. So I don't know. I'm in Canada and the system here is a little bit different, I think, with the accreditation for teachers and that, but you have to go to a teacher's college or some certification program in the United States?
Well, it depends on the state. Since I live in Florida and there's a teacher shortage in Florida, there has been a teacher shortage
Hmm.
there. How do I say this? Accre- they've allowed people outside of people with teaching certificates in education to be able to teach. So in my
Okay.
case, I have a double major in political science and psychology,
Okay.
and I wanted to be a history teacher. And so since I have at least one degree in that area of social studies, then I can get a temporary certificate and teach now for 5 years. And that'll give me that'll give the teachers time to get their professional certificate, which then also lasts about 5 years, I believe.
Okay. So you're 10 years in, so you did that professional certificate process at some point?
I No, I did not.
Okay.
So what I did was I had a temporary certificate and then it expired in private school. And then I
Hmm.
wanted to work in charter school, so I needed the temporary certificate again. And so I got another one. And then the first year into charter school was the year that COVID happened. And then that's when everything changed with education.
Hmm.
So my entire time with the charter school was, up until this last school year from COVID till then.
Okay. So because it's interesting because I think that like for listening to your video, um, I think that there's some exposure to James Lindsay in there.
Yes.
Yes. Um, and I was actually sort of excited. to hear your teacher's story, partly because I was like I'm very concerned about what's going on in the teachers' colleges, because I think that like Paulo Freire and pedagogy of the press is oppressed
Yeah.
is prevalent there, but I really want to talk to someone who's gone through the schools to figure out like how is it manifesting.
I'm not great. I'm not going to be honest when it comes to like the technical stuff, the nitty gritty on what
Mhm.
the philosophers and different people have said. I'm learning. I just started,
Yeah.
but I can tell you what happens in schools, and then we can sort of work it out
Yeah.
to see what sort of what's happening there.
Yeah, so
Um,
I want to get into that. So you didn't actually go through
no, I'm an
that
outsider.
system. You're outsider. Okay. But yeah. But did any of the teachers you went through with that, like how was it like I in the school environments? Because you were also in, you said you were in like you said charter schools and private schools?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So they may be a little freer and open about your opinions or no?
Um, it Private schools are extremely variable. It all depends on the
Hmm.
parents. It all depends on the people who have money. Because if you have, let's say, a few woke parents, they can really throw the weight around.
Hmm.
Because and if necessary, the amount of money that a wealthy parent can generate for a private school might be greater than the services rendered by a teacher or two.
Yeah,
So
that's
so
critical.
that's
Yeah.
definitely happens in that. Charter schools, I would say, are better because in many charter schools, the focus is on, especially for the high schoolers, advanced AP classes, dual enrollment. There's no time to, do woke things or it's they, especially in high school, they strictly hit the reading, writing, and arithmetic.
Arithmetic, right? Because they're preparing for the SATs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they want their students to graduate already with their associate's degree, or at least, at least a few classes that you don't have to take in college because you already had I hate to say it, but the rigor of
Yeah.
AP classes. Definitely.
That's interesting. And that's very different in Canada because we don't have standardized testing. So there's
Oh,
not
okay.
there's no um I mean there is now, at least in my province, there's like they have some sort of, I guess, what do you call it, like state level, provincial level testing to just sort of like
To
assessments,
like place
but
them? Okay.
not for placements, but just to see how the kids are doing, something like a government benchmark, so they can see if
Right.
skills are
Okay.
improving or declining. But there's nothing that gets you into college or gets you into the next, like gets you into a specific school or stream. They've done a really
So
good job of like
is it based on grade point average and teachers' recommendations and things like that?
in theory.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
So a lot like private schools in that sense.
Yeah. Um, what was I going to say? Yeah, it's so yeah, I am well, because grades, they've really done a good job of like making grades matter less and less and less. So uh
Yeah, I mean, the grade
presumably,
inflation that exists is
yeah,
enormous.
the grade inflate, or just not grading at all in a lot of things in Canada now. It seems like it's just like the
Oh,
grades are irrelevant.
okay.
Like they're just putting people up.
That's weird.
Well, like they've really associated now, like, oh, you're a certain age, you're a certain grade. So there's no real performance on merit or actual standards. Like there's still a curriculum that they're going through, but there's not like uh, yeah, it doesn't seem to really matter if the
I
students
mean,
have the competencies or not.
that sounds like you have many different levels in one classroom, which is
Oh
difficult for
yes,
the teacher.
oh
Oof.
yes, yeah, yeah. No, it's like everyone in one classroom, and everyone goes up the grades together. But I am, yeah. So let's actually go in. I don't want you to like out out your coworkers and anything of that, but do you feel like what sort of inspired you to speak out? Was there, because you seem like you're sort of like out of like the worst of the woke schools,
Well, this
but
is it. Yeah, sorry. This is
yeah.
really interesting because for me personally, it's not like the walls are closing in. It's not
Hmm.
like there's all these initiatives and workshops pushing us to do so. But there's a few things that I've noticed, and I mean, I've read and heard things from all over the world, from different states in the country, all over
Hmm.
the world, and I don't know. I was just like, why aren't more teachers just saying things about this? Why aren't they just saying like, or let me say it another way. why is it that only one specific group of people with,
Hmm.
or why is it that, goodness, why is one opinion elevated above all the rest?
Yeah.
Why can't I, as someone who loves the US Constitution and the US Bill of Rights, be proud of that, say, I love America, and, like have my TikToks where I have my American flag and all that stuff in my
Hmm.
classroom and be like, yeah, America first. Like, why would that person have a more difficult time getting a job in the United States? And
Yeah.
that is just absurd to me. And I honestly, I sat on this for I sat on the video for the entire summer. At least the idea was just bouncing around in my head.
Hmm.
And then it just got to a point where I'm like, I'm annoyed. Usually for me, that's the emotion that motivates
Hmm.
me, is annoyance and frustration. And so I just sat down and I did it. I worked on it for like 6 or 7 hours or something. And then I just hit upload.
Hmm.
And it was crazy because I uploaded to YouTube and Rumble and got absolutely almost no traction, 50 combined views between both of them. And then
Hmm.
just Twitter went crazy. And I couldn't sleep. I felt the injection of the dopamine of
Yeah.
like, or paying attention. I was just like, why aren't teachers saying anything? Someone should. And then I got attention. I'm like, oh, no, 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 not like that. I really wanted to delete the video because it was just, I'm an introvert and it was
Yeah.
just too much for me at once. And I mean, it wasn't that, it was negative. It was pretty much 99% positive, but still, it was just, oh my God, social media is serious business. I really didn't know because up until that point, maybe everything I said or posted had like 10, 20 views. I felt like I was shadow banned or in the shadow realm somewhere.
Yeah.
And I don't know, it was just
It
shocking.
it's also sort of safe though too, right? Because it's sort of like when you don't have that many views, then you sort of feel like, oh, I can go on the internet and say things, and it's not that um inflammatory because most people aren't going to see it or notice it. So when people do start seeing something, then and it is mattering to people, then that like does this put you on, because then you're wondering like what is it
Yeah,
that's
it's
getting the
crazy.
attention.
Yeah, the crazy thing was, from reading the reactions and everything, was this is happening in most states. This is happening in many
Hmm.
countries. This is happening seemingly everywhere all at once,
Yeah.
and that's kind of bizarre. Like that, just naturally, someone should be asking questions at that point.
Hmm.
And it was great, that I'm a pessimist
Hmm.
oftentimes, and having the encouragement from parents and other people, like, yeah, like normal's good. Like I want to normalize normal again.
Yeah.
So so I don't know. It was good in that sense, but also scary at the same time because people are like, okay, now keep on going, do it again, tell us other
Hmm.
things, and then it's like, oh well, I didn't get that far.
That's all.
So I
I
I'll
just said
just
one thing.
figure it out as I go along, kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I was thinking just on it, like some of the things that you said in your video were very interesting. And you do have like this background in history. So you're from the like the social sciences side of this too.
Hmm.
When you were doing your um college degree and that, did you come exposed did you feel exposed to like the woke stuff or
So
postmodernism?
so
Yeah.
in college, the beginnings of it, not in the institution. Well, I mean, a little bit in the institution itself, mostly from the students, not the professors.
Hmm.
There was still pushback from the professors. Um, but what I did notice were the activists, and the
Hmm.
activists were very like, let's burn the system to the ground kind of thing. And I'm like, wait, peaceful protest. That the key word
Hmm.
is peaceful. And I don't know, it's just I didn't like that sort of thing. It's like it might be naive, it might be pie in the sky, but I appreciate the United States. I am thankful for the United States because it was safe haven for both of my parents because
Hmm.
they had similar political situations, but very different political situations that brought and personal situations that brought them to the United
Yeah.
States. And then they met and made me, and that's really important. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the US. So
Hmm.
that's why I said in my video, I kind of owe the US my life. And
Hmm.
I want to protect what made the United States I don't know, the country in which, but this, sorry, uh, there's a reason why the United States, why out of
They
all the
both,
countries in the
yeah.
world, people come here the most.
Yeah.
Like there's a very specific reason for, and I don't even know for how long this has been true, but for decades, people want to
Hmm.
come to the United States. There must be a reason why, and I don't know, sometimes the the immigrants and the children of immigrants have to remind the people who've been
Hmm.
here for a long time and don't have an outside perspective of how good people here actually have it. It's like
Yeah.
people talk about privilege, and it's like, do you realize that you're on your iPhone communicating because satellites in space and all that stuff and cables underneath the ocean, like we made that. Like the United States produced everything around you, and it's the number one privilege that you have. Like I
Hmm.
have family members that come here, and I took them to Disney World, and they're
Hmm.
like, oh my God, this is like, they just, even some of them who are like, oh, the United States, they're imperialist and they do all these things,
Hmm.
are like, wow, they can also produce a place of joy that
Hmm.
does not exist and will never exist in my home country. And so the United States is unique, and
Yeah.
people have forgotten that, I think.
So what, just on the parents thing, can you tell me like what kind of political situation did they come with? Was there any sort of totalitarian or Marxist influence in the countries that your parents came from? Like you said,
Well, my dad's side is Cuban, so
okay. So
the
definitely there,
the
yeah.
communist Marxist
Mm.
communist influence there. And my mom, it was more of a personal reason. There was just, everything was overregulated in
Mm.
Chile. My mom wanted to be a PE teacher, and she had to take super advanced biology classes, and she couldn't hack it. And she's like, really, the bar is so high just to like show kids how to do push-ups? Seriously, that's
Yeah.
crazy. That's insane. And the pay, there's, she found no place for her to progress forward. And my mom
Hmm.
is, compared to her sisters, was a very kind of different, I don't want to say radical, but kind of, well, compared to her family, she was very different. She's like, I should do this thing, very impulsive. So I guess, it
Hmm.
runs in the family. But politically, around when she came over, it was around the time of Pinochet, who
Hmm.
was, the rightist reactionary
Yeah.
uh,
It's
government
reactionary, right?
to
Yeah.
leftism. And even then, she's like, oh, this is really bad too, and came to the United States. So like, my family has experience of both, what people would consider fascism and communism,
Yeah.
and both of them suck. Like, if we have to choose, like,
Both
why do we have
forms
to
of
choose
tyranny.
between, exactly,
Yeah.
like, why do you have to choose between two horrible choices? And
Hmm.
we've seen that politically in the United States with the binary choice of, septuagenarian one and septuagenarian two.
Yeah. And it's yeah. I think that there is though too this idea of like it's easy to forget when we're talking about um a Marxism and wokeism that there's tyranny on the other side too. Like there's a reactionary tyranny that can also
Absolutely.
be produced. And it's
Well,
and we have to watch out for that. I sort of like I was actually um having another conversation about this recently, but I'm oh, I don't know if you're familiar at all with the Narnia books. The Lion, the
I've
Witch, and
read
the
them a
Wardrobe,
very
very
long
long
time
time ago. So
ago.
you remember there was the White Witch
Hmm.
in the first in the first book that was written. Um, and that's sort of like the and she was a snow queen and she was in the overworld and everyone knew exactly what like the rules were very clear. Everything was ice
Hmm.
and snow, very static. That's like the right wing tyranny, right?
Yeah.
Of like everything is extreme and
Too much order.
it's very ordered and nothing is changing and everything is very rigid. If you have like later on in the series, there's a book called The Silver Chair,
Mhm.
and they encounter another witch, the Green Witch, and she lives in the underworld, and she manipulates everyone by deceiving them and having these theories and being and causing them to doubt things. And she's like the left wing tyrant, right? Where it's more this theoretical tyranny where there's this tyranny of
It's more chaotic.
well, yeah, it has chaotic origins, but it's also like if you're doing the chaos and order thing, but it's
Mhm.
also I think uh speculative and doubting. Like it's sort of like all about shadowings and questioning like does truth even exist? Like what is truth anyways? What does anything really matter? Like it's all like look at this world and you know all there is what's in front of us. Like you should be concerned with that and not concerned about like
So
the
materialistic.
yeah. Well, yeah, well, there's instance like materialism, but more of like the way Marxism is materialistic in that it's sort of
Okay.
um, pleading that um, you should just be concerned um, uh, that you don't know anything, so you should listen to the experts. That's the best way to put it, right?
Okay.
Yeah. And so it's this sort of self-doubt and not just self-doubt, but just doubt, existential doubt, like sort of doubt that anything really exists. So, trust the experts is a big part of it.
Hmm. Okay, so
Yeah.
tyranny that just exemplifies how ignorant you are. Okay.
Well, I mean, like if we're going to talk about like the woke tyranny a bit more, um, like he used the word Gnosticism, right? Like you talked about Gnosticism. So I think that there's um different forms of Gnosticism, and um so there's the woke Gnosticism and Marxism, which is one kind of Marxism that emphasizes this idea of freedom from um responsibility and the tyranny of reality. And that's where you get these ideas of, okay, well, there's rich people and poor people, and we should just make everyone equal and everyone the same, and everyone should be comfortable and everyone should be happy, and it doesn't matter what you do, or we want equitable outcomes, right? That's
Y-
sort of that tyranny
Yeah,
there.
so I'm actually on that note, I've always been curious, how does that sort of thinking begin? Like where does it begin? That
Oh,
that like
yeah.
like how would it start is my question. Because I have this idea that a lot of Marxist thinking or the thousand derivatives that exist, it all stems from very childlike and childish kind of thinking.
Yeah,
Like
well,
in
they want to make you childish, right? Because that's again, there's like getting into the doubting thing. So let's actually talk like another form of Gnosticism is like the scientism. Like I think that's another species or line
Mhm.
of a lineage of Gnosticism, and they're more um, convinced they're interested in making this materialist well, the word is magisterium, like it's sort of like, but this hierarchy of experts who you should just defer to because they're the experts, they're the technocrats, and they know better than you. Why do they know better than you? Well, that's even them, you shouldn't even ask that because you wouldn't understand, right? And
Right.
then and we
That's where things like data driven and such like that come from.
yeah, yeah. But it's like we shouldn't even we don't even need to and it's there isn't real expertise in the world, right? That is just something that exists. But we should be able to um you should be able to explain yourself and justify us and not just say trust us, right? So when someone's like, well, we're not going to even debate this in public, that should be
That's
a red flag.
unacceptable.
Yeah, that's
Like it's like, hey, we had these conclusions on this brand new study. Great. Where's the data? Actually, we're gonna have to wait like 30 years for that. No,
mhm.
I cannot accept any conclusion you give me if you're not going to be transparent. Like
Yeah.
no. And on the tyranny thing, you can't be one extreme or the other. There needs to be order. Like you can't just have libertine freedom in the sense of I
Mhm.
can do what I want because I have that right. It's like, well, at the same time, there's things that you should do because they're the correct thing to do in a given situation. And that's a big reason why we have freedom. So we can, not just satiate our own needs, but assist others.
Yeah. So you asked the question, like, where does the Gnosticism come from? I mean, I think Jordan Peterson gives a pretty good answer of resentment of being, right? So you
Mm,
feel
you
like
didn't choose to be here. Yeah.
yeah, you didn't choose to be here, and you didn't and you there's things about reality that you judge God for, that you judge that you could somehow do better, right? And that's different than thinking like it's one thing to want to improve the world, but to think that like so like make I think that the world would be a better place if I mowed the lawn, right? Or something like, like that, like
Yeah.
there's incremental and changes, like uh, um there's things that you can do, but it's when you start to think, oh, I could remake the world better, like you're sort of questioning that this whole world needs to be transformed, that you have this theory in your head that will make um yeah that you can imagine a utopia, right? Actually, I don't. Do you know
Right.
the origin of the word utopia? This is one of my
Oh
thing.
gosh, I knew it, but no, if you test it on me, I
Okay,
wouldn't be able to recall
so
the definition.
it was coined by Saint Thomas More. So Thomas More was killed by Henry VIII.
Wait,
Um,
did it mean imaginary place?
yeah, it means no place. But he wrote the
Right.
book as a criticism of the idea of utopia, right? Of the criticism of the idea that you're aiming for this world that doesn't exist, right?
Hmm.
Because it's a rejection of God's creation, it's a rejection of this world, and it's also extremely like there's a level of hubris there, right? There's a high level of hubris where you're saying
We can do it better.
we can do it better than God. God made a mistake, right? So we can do it, or more specifically, I can do it better, right? Like, often it becomes very egotistical, and that's I mean, and that gets back to like the whole idea of of Cain and Abel, right? So Cain and
Mm,
Abel both
that's
made
right.
their right. Cain and Abel both made their offerings to God, and uh, Cain's was mediocre and rejected, right? Because he hadn't actually put forward the right the work or the well ordered. He hadn't offered what ought to be offered, and he was instead of accepting God's judgment, he was resentful of it, right?
Yeah,
Like he
and
questioning God and say and sort of so that's where it begins. It's in that
sorry. So I guess in a way, instead of looking at yourself and being like, how can I improve myself to better fit this crazy world?
yes,
The opposite opinion is, well, screw it. Let me just remake the world and not have to deal with me.
yes, that's where it starts. It's sort of capturing the knowledge of God for ourselves. It's saying I know better than God. That's where it starts. And God's a tyrant, and I need to so this world is something I need to escape or remake.
Yeah, and part of the reason I call it childish is because it's very easy for most people, especially if you have a terrible situation or you're in the middle of life events, to get into that line of thinking and not get
Oh
out of
yeah,
it.
yeah. And this is why we have like the whole idea, like you were talking about formation, and like with the secularization of schools, we forgot we stopped teaching the idea of virtues or thinking that kids um need formation to be good people, right? They need to mature in other aspects just besides reading, writing, and arithmetic. And I think that it's good that we've in instance that we left that to the parents, right? That we the United States offers that freedom, but at the same time, it needs to be done, and we can and it's dangerous to think that everyone is just a good person by default without going through the
Well, I
formative
mean,
process
okay,
of a conscience.
absolutely. The
Yeah.
idea, and that's where the idea of social emotional learning, on its face, it makes sense. Like,
Hmm.
okay, in order to succeed in life, you have to have good communication skills. You have to be aware of your strengths and weaknesses. Work well with other people in groups, and it's very basic. But it's just a backdoor that's used to, oh, need to have more empathy. Okay, now
Yeah.
let's learn about Harvey Milk or something like that. And it's like, oh, okay, that's a little strange, but on its face it makes sense.
Yes. Well, that's
And
yeah. On its face is key because that's actually how a lot of this Gnostic stuff takes hold, right? Is
double
that
meaning words and phrases.
it's deceptive and it takes over. Well, look at Disney and at Disney once upon a time made sense, right? A lot of these institutions worked well and were good things, but somewhere along the line they've been co-opted or subverted. So what it does is it um subverts something and then uh wears it as a mask, right? Like
As a skin
a
suit.
skin suit, exactly, like as a
I
skin
mean,
suit.
yeah, on
So
Disney, on Disney, I'm Hispanic. I despise the Snow White change. It's
mm,
like, dude, her name's Snow White. Like, come on.
yeah.
I feel offended that you think I needed this for my ego.
Yeah.
Sorry for interrupting.
No, I know that's fine. And I don't if Do you know who Jonathan Pageau is?
Oh gosh, yes,
Okay.
I've heard of him.
He's another Canadian, and he's a Orthodox Christian and an iconographer. And
Oh,
he does like so he does a lot of symbolic art, and he's just did a Kickstarter to before the Disney announced their movie, he started this Kickstarter to actually like make an authentic Snow White that goes back to the source of the story with all the rich symbolism in it.
oh, that would be
And
great.
he asked it. I think his Kickstarter starter was for originally 30 or $40,000, and I haven't actually checked, but someone told me the other day that it was up to $500,000.
Oh my God, I'm gonna check it out after this
Yeah,
and
yeah, I'll
donate
send
if
you a
it's still
link.
up because that's great.
Yeah, no, it's
No, yeah,
awesome.
I just remembered I listened to a Jordan Peterson an interview with
Hmm.
Pageau once or twice or something like that. That's great.
Hmm.
Honestly, and that's part of it. What's wild is um, how do I say this? Our culture doesn't mirror any positive things. It doesn't mirror positive
Yep.
examples of marriage. It doesn't mirror positive examples of children being raised or anything like
Hmm.
that. Like one of the crazy things is I remember when I was a kid, teachers would ask, "Hey, who wants to be a parent when they're older?" And always everyone in the class except me would raise their hands. Like I
Yeah.
was just anti-kid. I don't want to have kids. That changed actually,
Hmm.
being a teacher. Um, but now it's the opposite. Maybe 20% of the students would raise their hands and they're like, kids suck. They're annoying. They're a waste of
Yeah.
money. They're this and that. And I'm like, and I just today I saw a video of PewDiePie being
Hmm.
like, hey, I'm a dad now. And it's like, wow, you actually see the physical and you see the physical changes in that person. And what's wild is even for someone as wealthy and famous as
Hmm.
someone like that, having a child humbles you like nothing else. It makes
Hmm.
you a human and it just like it makes you grow as a person. And
Absolutely. Yeah. No, it's because you're forced to think about someone else besides yourself, right? Um, and actually, what did I want to get to? Like, so one of the things that Marxists did, um, that I think that the big innovation of Marxism in the 20th century was instead of going after the means of production, they realized they
mhm,
needed to go after the means of reproduction
of
or replication.
replication, yeah.
Yeah.
And that's why they went into the schools
So
and
they went out into
institutions.
schools, they went into the media, they went into where else did they go? They went into academia. I could think of some other good examples here. Oh, they went after the families, right? Because
Mm,
these are all means of replication, right? So all these systems, and what they did was they didn't come and say like, "Yo, we're Marxist now," but they attacked the fidelity of that replication or reproduction, right? So they started to take off the wheels of that. So there's things in there like grading, like standardized testing,
mhm.
um, like textbooks, uh, that help keep the fidelity, right? That help keep the replication correct, right? There's and in the media, like we have, and, well, I guess also like the culture, like there's replication in that too in our stories and that. So what they did is they
Mhm.
started to attack um the safeguards or the things that keep those replications true. So that introduces the possibility of replication error, right? So like you do a photocopy of a photocopy of a photocopy, the it
It'll
gets
degrade
worse and worse and worse.
eventually, yeah.
It degrades. So they created in the system where they uh, so they added chaos to the system or possibility of degradation, and then they directed that degradation in a certain direction, right? So first step is to take off the guardrails, and then once the guardrails are off, then you start um pushing or weighing the system. So you're directing those replication
Tilting it
errors.
in that
Yeah,
direction, yeah.
right. So the first steps, for example, are to um take off the standardized testing. So then no one knows what you're like. Then we don't know what's going on in the classroom. And then you can start teaching the Ferrarian method of like introducing more and more um, social justice and politics into the lessons. So you're starting to weigh the chaos in a certain direction, right?
Yeah. What's crazy is like for me, I'm trying to like I've seen the end like my family has seen the end results of this Marxist communist sort of thinking, and
Mm-hmm.
it always turns out badly. And I'm thinking, why don't people see it? So, but the important part is how the thinking happens, how it gets reinforced. It's just an echo chamber that just gets bigger and bigger and bigger because, like you said, it starts at the top with the theories in education, and then eventually you'll have some of those people who learn those theories. They're
Mm-hmm.
gonna Not everyone can be a PhD professor, so they end up going to schools and they end up teaching that because that's what they know.
Yeah.
And then
But there's
that becomes a
also
new
mhm,
way of replicating in the society new ideas through
yeah.
the school system. And then, well, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
one of the wild things, actually, my first eye-opening lesson as a teacher was, since I had the same students for history and English, I said, oh, we're reading Animal Farm for sure. It was for my sixth graders.
Mm-hmm.
And we got to the point in the book where Napoleon takes the puppies and they're
Mm-hmm.
like, then they go away for half the story.
Yeah.
And then something hit me. And then I told the students, I'm like, okay, you're gonna have a homework assignment for this entire week and the weekend and all that. For the next 7 days, you're gonna write down the amount of time that you spend with your parents, the amount of time you spend like, playing video games. I gave them like six or something like six categories. But the only thing I was looking at was how much time do you spend with your parents? And that time, like, I mean, quality time talking to them. None of this, like,
Yeah.
oh, we're having dinner and everyone's on their phone while, shoveling food in their mouths. No, like actual learning something. And
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't count it, like, none of this watching TV shows, actively talking or sharing ideas or anything like that.
Yeah.
For the most
Playing.
part,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, for the most part, playing games or things like that,
Yeah.
something interactive. And for the most part, I would spend more time with them than their parents.
Mm-hmm.
And that was, I mean, they looked at me and I looked at them with the same reaction, like, oh my, what's actually happening? Oh,
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know what the results would be. I thought they would spend more time with their parents, but no, but both of them work and everything gets more complicated. And so what's been happening is that teachers now spend more time with teaching them virtues. And that's where the problem comes in, because I remember a few years ago, my school wanted to teach, something about like the 12 pillars of virtue or something like that. And
Mm-hmm.
the first virtue was pride. And I'm thinking,
Yeah.
I'm not teaching
Yeah.
that, because like, yes, I'm thankful I'm Hispanic. I love that I'm like where my parents
Mm-hmm.
come from. I love the mix. I love who I am, but I also know that I could have been anyone else at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not like I've made some great contribution to my culture that my people should exalt me in some way. No, like for the most part, I've just like kind of like rode on its coattails because I don't know, like
Yeah.
most people do. And having this pride of like because like having pride in who you are might be fine, but that slips into, oh, now I'm better than you.
Yeah. It also
And
slips
that's
down.
really scary.
It's also a necessity to start thinking that you're better than God and you can make the utopian world, right? Is that's why that's one of the reasons they want to cultivate pride so much, and they're pushing the Pride Month in that too, is because it's up to you. It's letting the ego and the pathos rule you, right? As opposed to logos. And um yeah, where was it going to go? Because that's a really interesting point. And that they introduced something called 12 virtues, and then the first one would be pride, because actually like another big part of it is the epistemic humility is good, right? So like humility at um knowing that you don't know everything, I think is critical to being a teacher, and also like to interacting with the world uh is knowing that there is truth out there, and you don't have it. So there is something to learn. There is something to do worth everything. And I think I sort of picked that up, I think, in your video, that sort of desire to like show them that there's like that the world is like you said, the world is complex and people are complex. So I like, if you wanted to dig into that, I'd be interested to hear what you had to say.
Okay, so I'm what is it? I think Joe Rogan said it best. Like, don't be married to your ideas. Like, I know that my ideas can be wrong.
Hmm.
The higher I guess for my first principles, I highly doubt it, but maybe someone can prove me that there's a better system than what the United States created with the Bill of Rights and the Constitution. I'm open to that.
Hmm.
So far, Marxism hasn't been the answer though. So,
Hmm.
um, but like my job as a teacher isn't to tell students what to believe. It's to point out inconsistencies in certain narratives and certain ways of thinking. It's to point out paradoxes that exist in the world. Um, if a narrative, if you ask a bunch of questions to a narrative and it falls apart, okay, it sucks. But if it holds
Hmm.
together, then okay, maybe you should check out that narrative. And I always told my students, I don't care what you believe, just know what you believe and be able to defend your beliefs. Because
Yeah.
I like if you just repeat what I say or just repeat the antithesis of what I say, you don't know why you think things and you're just an NPC, you're just a robot, and no one likes that.
Yeah.
And
So do you know how familiar are you with Socrates?
I use a
Okay.
Socratic method here and there.
Okay, because well, like there's the famous story about a Socrates is him going to the oracle at Delphi, right? And
Yes.
asking the oracle who's the wisest person, and the oracle like comes back with you, Socrates, and he being very concerned about that because he was quite convinced that
He's like,
he knew
wait, I don't
nothing.
know anything though. How is
Yeah.
it me?
Right. So then he went and talked to all these like to different people and different trades and like and clerics and scholars and people different people in different roles in society, and he came to the conclusion um that they all possessed like in one way or another this they all believed that they in some way one way or another possessed the gnosis, that they possessed actually like a part of the knowledge of God, right? That they knew something definitive about the world. And
I think
because
especially the poets. Yeah.
the Stoics, yeah. But but and so he realized that he was wise in the fact that he knew that that he didn't have access to that knowledge. That knowledge was something that um like the true knowledge, like the gnosis was something that was the province of the gods, belonged to the gods alone, and only he could and he could admire, but never and strive for glimpses and under like have this relationship with it. He can love it, but he could never possess it.
Oh, so you can only look at it from a distance and you can't hold on to it and
You
much
can't
less create it yourself.
like the fruit in the garden of Adam and Eve, right? It's sort of like God puts his plan there, but it's yours to admire, but don't touch and don't eat it. Don't presume that it's yours. So going back to um to Socrates, that's actually where the term philosophy comes from, like philosophia, right?
Hmm.
Is the love of wisdom, and it's that it's an explicit stating of that relationship. It's like the knowledge is not something to possess; it's something to be loved, to be admired, right? So I think that
Yeah,
like that's
it's
actually the
something to appreciate
mhm.
because you can like
So
how do I
and
say it?
so that's actually like a part of what I think you're trying to get to with your students, right? Is sort of saying is like, look, it's like you're never going to have the absolute knowledge, but you're going to experience images of it, and you're going to have the these inspirations. You're going to have so you have to be a lover of wisdom, while also keeping in mind that it's not something, but keeping down that pride, like keeping down that hubris of saying it's something I possess or something that I dictate, right?
Yeah, it's so difficult because the more knowledge you collect, the more powerful that you think you are, and that gets to your head. I had a few students, I mean, I myself believe that at a few points in my life.
Yeah. Oh, it's tempting. And
Um,
that's actually, sorry, go ahead.
no, and it's such a it's a very fine line to, there is truth in the world, and there's different
Mhm.
religions, there's different societies and cultures that stumble upon a different version of it, or maybe parts of it, or something like that.
Yeah.
But no one group or one person can ever possess it all, or even see it all in their
Yeah.
lifetimes, I believe. It's just too much for one person to handle.
Yeah.
And I don't know, it's just, I think that we should be very careful in, okay, knowledge is very fragile, and it's a Jenga tower kind of thing. But sorry,
Yeah.
where are you trying to get
Oh,
to?
well, a couple, yeah, just in there too. I think that they're, and this is actually one of the things the Gnostics do is they try and diminish truth, right? Bring it down to something that they could actually possess. And one of the ways to do it is like, oh, you have your truth, I have my truth. Well, it's implicit in that language is that the truth is something you can possess, right? Where I think that like truth is singular and eternal and out like it's unified.
Oh
So
my
we all
God.
can have like when you're really saying I have truth, you're really saying I have well I have like a an understanding of the truth that you may not have. Like I've had this glimpse of it. Um, but it's not you never actually have the truth. The truth is out there as X-Files says, but it's not something that we possess. But we can copy it and we can understand part of it. And when we do, that's amazing, right? So it's in that way
Is that where
we can
the
tap into it.
illumination is that where
Yeah.
the illumination comes from?
The
Like
illumination of
you're illuminated by an idea or something like
yeah.
that.
Yeah, but getting so what you're saying, like the way I would phrase it, because I think that's true, that that different people have um uh different takes on the truth, and it's worth listening to. Like that's what this show is about, right? It's like um discerning truth by by having these discussions, like having a discussion with someone who's speaking in good faith. It's how we keep each other connected to reality and the authentic. Like it's how we keep each other sane and not just
That's
to
the key
sane.
phrase. The
Yeah.
key phrase is good faith. And when you're mentioning that, I remembered something, a very good lesson a professor taught me. I don't know what was up with me, but one day we were having, it was philosophy,
Hmm.
and I just came out and said, truth is subjective. And she just goes, wow. And then just rolled her eyes and kept on lecturing. And then I'm like, wait, what did I say? And then I wanted to talk to her after class, and she's like, I'm not going to address that. That's something you have to figure out on your own. And oh my God, the existential crisis that I had. I'm like, wait a second. Oh my God, hubris. Oh dear. Okay, I had to take a step back from so many things, because like, and it was great because the professor, she told me, she didn't spoon feed it to me. She
Hmm.
said, there's something there that you have to find, but I can't tell you what it is, because then it'll lose its magic. Like, the discovery is there for you to be shocked at your discovery. That realization is something that you need to have as someone who wants to continually educate yourself. And if you don't have that, you're not learning. And
Hmm.
that's what I also try to instill in my kids. I want you to have those oh moments. That means you're growing. That means you had a
Yeah.
realization. That's a good thing.
Yeah.
And yeah, sometimes you have to put yourself through the ringer a little bit to realize, oh, I was totally wrong about that.
Yeah.
Got it.
It's
Instead
it's
of also, instead of also just being lectured to be like, you're wrong, because a lot of people don't take kindly to that.
yeah, it's the struggle. And that's critical. And that's how we actually grow in virtue. I think like your professor was very wise to do that. And I'm glad that she like, because some people would just stop in their arrogance. I'm glad she had like the perception to know that you would respond uh the right way, or hope maybe, or at least hope that you are the kind of
Yeah,
person who would respond the right way
it
to
was
that.
so shocking. Wow.
But yeah, and actually I think that's to get into that is that's how we grow in virtue. I was talking before about like how we form our conscience. You need to go through that struggle or and another I think like it's that sort of which is sort of like a form of suffering yourself in order to come over it, right? Actually, where the word Israel comes from? It's it's actually it's a story about okay, so one of the stories in Genesis is about Jacob.
Hmm.
And Jacob's a little bit of a liar. He's a little bit of a fox, and he steals his brother's birthright. He goes off, and for 14 years he ends he sort of gets his karma that like where yeah, after being a deceiver, he is deceived and has to go through these adventures, but eventually he gets his life together and he wants to come back and make up with his brother, and he hears that his brother is coming with his camp to come get him, and he's terrified that his brothers wants his revenge. So he sets his family across this river. So he throws everything that he's owned, everything he possesses. He sends away because he's afraid
Hmm.
of what's going to happen to it. Happen to all the things that he loves if they stay with him. And so he's on this riverbank alone at night, and God comes down to him, and what does and God doesn't like isn't giving him um obvious like blessings and mercy, that what God comes and wrestles with him, right? So he wrestles with God for that evening, right?
One
And
who wrestles with God.
yeah,
Yeah.
and in the end he wins, but of course, like God's God, so God lets you win, right?
Hmm.
And that is that fatherly love of like wrestling with your kids, right? Of that, like, so it makes them stronger. So God came and I gave Jacob what he needed to become stronger and become the man who could face his brother.
Well, and if God always wins, the human isn't going to want to come back because they know that they're just going to get stomped on every
Yeah,
time.
yeah. Like I think maybe you've heard Jordan Peterson's rat story before.
Absolutely. That's what it
Yeah,
reminded me of. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Right. And that's I think that's so critical to this conception of because that word for that in the Bible of that kind of love is caritas, right? Which is the word is often earlier translations was charity. So that's
Hmm.
it's the same
Makes
charity
sense.
that we have. Like we use the word good faith, but it's the same charity you have in a dialogue, right? Is that we're speaking together, we're being charitable, we're listening to each other, and then we're also um, responding to what the other person has to say, right?
Yeah.
And we're both trying to get closer to the truth, and that's and by doing so, we're finding the frame of the conversation. So we're discerning truth in this. We're 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 having a good conversation now, but we're also learning. We're exchanging something and learning something important about the future and the rest of the world ourselves, right? So this thing is happening on multiple levels.
I think it's really important to have the discussion and answer the questions that the person is asking, not the questions you think that they're asking
Yeah.
or what they represent overall. Because sometimes, I mean, Twitter's Twitter. I get into political spats and here and there, and I troll every so often. Um, and I don't like this idea of left and right and things like that. Like
Mhm.
it's we're sort of fraying at the seams kind of thing.
Yep.
My whole idea now is this is radical centrism. Like I don't want to be a meme of someone on the right or someone on the left. I want to be able to look at an individual issue and come to a conclusion on that, come to
Yeah.
a conclusion on something else, and then maybe I'm wrong. Okay, let's have the discussion. Maybe like I could reconfigure, but I don't want to be beholden to a bunch of elitists who don't give like who don't care about me as a person. Like
Hmm.
I don't understand that.
Yep.
And I also feel that we're in end time empire phase. We're in the fourth turning, I believe. There's a lot of historical things, and there's a lot of
Hmm.
indicators that point to things are going to get a little difficult. And if we don't figure out now how to deal with each other like in a civil fashion, things are only going to get like the temperature is only going to start rising, especially in the 2024 election in the United States. Like things are only
Hmm.
going to get worse. If you can't do it now, it it's going to be
Hmm.
each passing year is going to be more difficult to find a compromise and a solution because the trick about politics is yes, you want your side to win, but if your side wins too much, then you have a one party system and that is bad. You
Yep.
actually want the continual struggle back and forth to get the best people on both sides and then have a win for the team. You're
Yep.
like you're actually winning for everyone. That's the idea, but
Yeah.
We've gotten too lost in the fight
Well,
recently.
yeah, lost in the fight and then winning for everyone is key. Because like again, the dialogue, what keeps the whole dialogue together is first aiming at truth and and having love or good faith, right? So actually, and one of the key things about the Gnostics, what they when they go off on this journey of like wanting to escape reality, they're also trying to escape truth, right? And you think of
Hmm.
snakes can like sort of weave through, like you think of truth as rods and sort of snakes as things that can weave through bars or rods. Um, so and I think that the way that they do that, like I was talking about, they introducing replication errors, and that's
Mm.
introducing a way you can think of this. So they're mixing, they're taking some of the real that's been claimed and introducing some fake, right? They're introducing
They're
some,
mutating it. Yeah.
yeah, but they're what they're when they're mutating it away from what's real and authentic and creating like a pseudo reality or a make believe world that because they've taken the part of the truth out and kept it for themselves, they then have
Hmm.
like they can then control and direct because they know how they're sort of have made themselves in charge of this make believe world by keeping its secrets.
Gosh, that's so sinister.
Yeah, but it's like that. So when you see that when they're doing that, they're not playing the truth game anymore, right? They're playing another, like we're playing the truth meta game. We're trying to figure out what the world is and what's going on, and you need that in order to have good faith. But the problem is that people who don't believe in truth anymore, like believe the truth is
Mm.
subjective, right? That kind of thing.
Oh gosh.
Yeah. um uh then what as of course like they have just power, so they play what I call as the mendacity metagame. And
Mm.
mendacity, I don't know if you're not a lot of people are familiar with that word. I think that they should be,
Nope.
but it's lying to get what you want, right? So if you call in sick for work but you're not really sick, that's
Mm.
mendacious. If you
Got it.
are the dog ate my homework is mendacious, right? So you're actually you're forming you're trying to uh conjure the world you desire. You're using language to conjure the world you desire as opposed to truth, which is proclaiming the world that is, right? So and so they're playing that metagame, and it's pulling us into more and more fake worlds. And it can be very in the short term, it can be a very effective solution because if people are under the mistaken delusion, but things are still very relatively close to reality,
Hmm.
then then you're basically you're like you're a rent seeker of sorts. Like you've actually you've run a successful scam and you can sort of like drift off of the system.
You just
But
reminded me of. No, sorry, continue.
yeah, but the problem is that the more that this is done, the farther things go away from reality, and the more fake the world becomes, and you eventually have like a world that's completely disconnected from reality, and that's what you see now. But I think that's actually what we're seeing, why the discourse is falling apart in the United States, and that's because some people are playing the truth game. Some people have been playing a truth meta game. Some people have been playing the mendacity meta game, and then there's some people who are think that are being deceived because they don't realize that some people play the mendacity game, and they're sort of like being pulled off in this whole direction because they haven't really thought things through.
Oh my God,
And
I did that. I did that. Are you familiar with the Ash conformity test or the Ash line test?
yeah, I saw that you tweeted that.
Yeah,
Um,
so
yeah, why don't you tell us
I
about it?
need to finish that video. So yeah, what it is, it's basically you have a reference line on the left, lines A, B, and C on the right, and I would ask my classroom, does the reference line match line A? They would raise their hands. Same thing for B and C. So what I did was I the trick is everyone is in on the joke and is picking predetermined answers except for one person.
Hmm.
So what you do is you create a false echo chamber, and then you
Hmm.
see how the person reacts. Are you going to go along with the crowd? Are you going to argue with them? What are you going to do? And you like you actually see the power of the echo chamber. Like these kids have a physical reaction when they look around the room with panicked eyes and then raise their hand to go along with the group,
Hmm.
or when they don't go along with the group. In some situations I had the students kind of turn and look at the kid in question, which, oh my god, like
Hmm.
it's actually terrifying to go against the crowd. And a few of them, a few of the smart ones went and actually measured it, and then, as the class, I went along with it. I'm like, no, you're wrong. The answer is B, not C. Like, he's,
Hmm.
no, but it's the same length as a reference. I'm like, no, you're wrong. And these kids could not fathom why someone would blatantly lie to them like that.
Hmm.
Just
Yeah.
they couldn't figure it out. Now, of course, I told them, like, okay, we're just joking, like, yeah, you're
Hmm.
not going crazy. That's where the self-doubt kicked in for a lot of
Yeah.
the kids. I'm like, okay, you're not going crazy. I gave them a full debriefing and explanation. I gave them
Hmm.
a cookie and everything. Like, okay, things are good, because it was absolutely being realizing that suddenly reality is not what you think it
Hmm.
is terrifying for anyone.
Yeah.
And yeah, like I
And but I think that's the danger though too, is that people need to be aware that um that politics has become like pro wrestling, that there's this whole it's reality mixed with fake, right?
Mhm.
And that no, people are trying to deceive you. They're putting on a performance, some of them, and you have to try, and it's up to you to figure out who's putting on the performance. Not everyone is operating in good faith.
Find the bigger liar.
Yeah. And not and don't and going around and just shouting liar at everyone isn't always very productive either, because you still have to figure out the truth. So really you have to start playing that truth game, and discerning with people, which not everyone knows how to do, right? Is the other side of this. And
Mhm.
yeah, so it is a big mess, but I think that um having conversations like this is one way to start. uh
Yeah, I mean, because there are people willing to have those conversations. It's just hard to find sometimes.
mhm. Yeah, and that's what I'm trying to do with the show, is trying to model that for people so that they can get the idea across that no, there is a way to get um back to truth and back to discernment that's not as crazy or radical as it may seem. And once we start doing that, once we start saying no, well, because I think another big part of this is people assume, and I think that it's very easy to stay connected to reality and what's authentic. And I think it's actually something that's difficult and requires continual discipline.
I think COVID was a big eye opener for a lot of people
Oh
in that
yeah,
regard,
yeah.
because oof, the trauma, the collective trauma that we faced from COVID has not been addressed
Hmm.
in a wide scale, and that's extremely unfortunate. And the aftershocks of that are still not done. Those kids who went through those key critical periods wearing their masks
Hmm.
and all that, when they had to, understand their language, they're probably in fifth grade right now. So like
Hmm.
they still have to go through the rest of middle and high school to, and then we're gonna see those we're gonna see performance probably drop in the future for high school kids. And going back, the thing that shocks me the most is I would be okay, like I would be more okay with this woke ideology if it made kids read better, if it improved their math scores, if it
Hmm.
actually made them more intelligent gave them higher grades or better test scores or something like that. It does the opposite. It
Yeah.
makes them less critical thinkers. It makes them less creative.
Hmm.
They just it does the opposite. Like
Yeah.
it
Intentionally so, right? Because it's trying to cripple their development, and because people who are driven by ego and pathos are easier to control. And also like we talk about, and I'm getting this straight from Jim Lindsay, but we talk about learning loss for COVID, but we don't talk about learning loss for critical pedagogy in the classroom, right? Like all the Freirian methods. Like if
Mhm.
teachers are spending two-thirds of the class not actually teaching math, but having the political discussion because of the word problem that the math brought up, right?
Oh my gosh, yes,
Then
the struggle session within the word within the third word problem. Oh my, I just
yeah,
yeah, and
yeah,
then you don't focus on the actual math because it's like, oh yeah, we have calculators, we can no, you
yeah. That's actually yeah, something that I find yeah, very frustrating is that we're losing sight of a lot of these things. And this is actually another problem with um the way that the Gnosticism will work is that they try and make everything political, right? So and I don't think everything should be political. You could say because our politics system, like there's politicians who are making decisions about things, but I think that certain things,
but it's not just
like
top down, it's bottom up. It comes
yeah,
from the kids as well. It's kind of like as above, sort of, I forgot how you say it, but it combines as above as below kind of
yeah,
thing.
yeah,
And
top down, bottom
it,
up, and inside out, right? They're trying
and
to come
what's
out three ways.
unfortunate is, yeah, and what's unfortunate is if, if you're someone independent, like, hold on, wait a second. First of all, you don't even know what you're saying by saying all of these things. They just call you names. Like, oh my gosh, I've been called transphobic by students. Oh yeah, I remember one time this cisgender student was like, "You're being transphobic," and then this student who identifies, who's gender fluid was
Mhm,
like, "Actually, you're just name calling," and it's like, dude, people just throw around these words like they think they know what they're talking about, and
mhm,
they don't. They especially as kids, because, well, you're a kid, you don't sit down and just ponder your own thoughts, because you'd be a weird freaking kid if you did that.
mhm.
And sometimes it takes other people to be like, hey, here's a question, can you answer that? Oh, not as well as I thought I did. Maybe might have to change things, or maybe the world's a little more nuanced than I thought. And that's the number one thing,
Yeah.
as that you can prepare the students, because the world is very complicated. There's many shades of gray, and
Mhm.
you're going to realize that you're going to constantly change your opinions ever so slightly, and because you should constantly be getting more information.
Yeah. And um, so actually, one other, I just want to go on like one other aspect of like the how the Gnostics do this is like um they'll do what I call like a Gnostic negation or a Gnostic inversion of certain key concepts. And the more fundamental the concept, the more powerful the inversion. But a lot of these words like have either been lost, like I said, like mendacious, mendacity is a word people should know, but they don't, right? Like it's just gone. And there's other words like we were talking about truth, right? And I was saying like, well, there's these characteristics of truth that again, like the word truth has sort of been supplanted, and we have like this sort of weird version of freedom again. Like we have very strange ideas about what freedom is. Um, so these keywords, but uh, I think like it the most like the most pernicious one I think right now, and they're trying to do is this whole idea of changing sex into gender and having this gender fluidity in that, right? Because sex is a very fundamental, it's one of the most fundamental realities, right? Man and woman.
Yeah,
And if
much
you
more
need,
than your ethnicity. Yeah.
right, so and getting back to what I was saying, like the green witch, right, is just like in the underworld saying, well, you don't know these things, you're going to need me to tell you how to navigate the world. Well, if they can steal the concept of man and woman from you, right, and say, well, what you actually need is a gender studies expert to tell you if that person is a man or a woman. You can't. That's not something you're certified to know yourself, right?
Then you're not certified for any kind of
Yeah,
discernment at that point.
exactly. Then you can't. That's exactly where it goes. Is that you are completely everything is in doubt. Then everything is like you can't be sure of anything. You have to defer. You're basically deferring all of your cognition to the experts. It's like better check in on CNN before I make a statement on anything because I don't even know what a man or woman is, right?
Yeah, and so for a lot of Marxists, they like to use the fallacy of equivocation, or in the sense of
Mhm.
like double meaning words and phrases and
Yes.
things like that. It's kind of like, they'll
that's
ask
the
you,
stepping stone.
do you believe in Black Lives Matters? Like which version? There's like 50 different ways you can ask that question or something like
Yeah.
that. Um,
Or even
or
diversity, equity, inclusion. Like those are the big three that, they moved on. It's like all those, what they mean by diversity, equity, and inclusion is not at
yeah,
all what regular people think those words mean, or it
yeah.
used to,
And
because eventually, because of the equivocation of that, they actually changed the meaning of the word in the usage, right?
ever
Like,
so slowly, yeah, different
yeah,
versions of it. And on the sex and gender thing, yeah, like that's a very common thing to be like, oh, well, technically sex and gender are different. And then I remember,
then why is it
yeah,
going on a
like,
driver's license? My driver's license used to
no,
show my sex.
it's not even that. It's
Yeah.
not even that. Like
Yeah.
you can have a lot of, different
Mm.
sorts of arguments, but I'm like, okay, which one's more important then? What are you talking about? Like, okay, let's say you have your sex and then your gender, and then they're different. Which one should take precedence? Is it the sex or the gender? Oh, it should be gender. Okay, then you don't care about sex at all. Like you don't actually care about the definition of sex. What you're doing
Mhm.
is you're using it just as a way to negate it and use your own definition to replace that one.
Yeah.
Like you're just putting it on stage just to execute it and replace it. And
Mhm.
so
It's a stepping stone. It's the remember I was saying about the
yeah, exactly
replication
what you said
errors.
about the stepping stone. And
The copy of a copy of copy. It's like, well, they introduced first this concept of, oh, those sex and gender are different, and now they're trying to collapse that again and sort of say, well, equip say sex is gender, right? And if so go,
I mean, that's how you have a lot
yeah,
of trans radical activists just claiming biologically that they are what they decided to transition into. It's like,
yeah,
no,
yeah,
actually, that's not true at all.
yeah. I
But
have
it,
periods now. Like it's yeah.
I can't. I honestly, I see those sometimes on Twitter, and
Mhm.
I just or X, whatever you want to call it. But I can't believe they're actually real. Like, it's like, is this happening for real? Like,
Yeah.
it just,
Well,
I
the
forget.
transspeciesm is the next thing on the horizon, right? And they're already pushing it in a lot of
Oh
this.
yeah, I remember seeing that video a few months ago about the red-tailed hawk named Horus, someone who identifies as a red-tailed hawk.
Okay.
And it was a joke, but then it becomes more serious, and then
Oh, it
transhumanism, transspeciesm,
well, this transspeciesm it's been a thing online
transracialism,
on Rumble since then 2015, 2014 at least.
transspeciesism.
That's when I was hearing about it. Not, did I say Rumble? No, I meant what was that called? Tumblr. It used to be a
Oh, Tumblr, yeah.
Tumblr. Yeah. So
Well, I
it's
haven't heard that.
there. Yeah. No, it's been around for a long time, but it's just and I've just been waiting for it in the shadows. But you're starting to see it on the TikTok videos, right? It's like people after they explain their gender, now they're explaining their species. So,
That's so
mhm.
weird.
Well,
I I mean,
if
for the average person who just starts consuming, TikTok, they're
mhm.
like, wait, how is this happening? And then you see other people all around you
Yeah,
doing the same thing, and then it just turns into a huge experiment. It
but
just
it's
the elevator experiment where everyone is in the
yeah,
elevator turned around the opposite direction, and you just, might as well just do it too.
but it's the replication thing too, right? And part of it is civilization because we live, we die, we're going through these cycles. We have this we have this we need this reproduction or replication to carry things forward. So for you and I, like there's warning bells, but for like kids who are just aren't spending any time with their parents and are just raised on TikTok and learning about the world from TikTok, like it's just what's in their feed, and the other things in their feed were true, so this must be true as well, right?
Oh gosh, yeah, no, that's true.
Hmm.
And taking the kids from the parents is a huge deal. Couple that with the divorce rate, single parenthood.
Yep.
Even when, I mean, I had both my parents, and my dad, I did not see him very much because he worked. My mom did
Yep.
not, but
Hmm.
still, like there's still a loss, especially for young boys who don't see their fathers as much as they should, and then they start idolizing rap artist, Andrew Tate, some other random people. And what I noticed, at least for a lot of my students, is the more they were estranged from their parents, the more that they were upset with their parents, the more that they were, quote, misbehaved, the
Hmm.
more likely they would look at what you would consider toxic role models, or role
Hmm.
models that are not telling young boys the best things.
Yeah. No,
And that
I agree with that assessment, right? Because it's um yeah, and it's unfortunate too, because well, I mean it's obviously unfortunate, but it I don't know, like it if they're looking for guidance, and if the proper guidance was there, they would be, I think they'd be more attracted to that. Because that's the yeah, I see Andrew Tate um as a sinister character. More so is because some of the things he says are good and positive, but I don't think he's saying it for the right reasons, and he's mixing in a lot of things. So he's actually like he he's he's manipulating these kids who aren't hearing any positive messages by offering them something they think that sounds good, but is just getting them clicks. So it's just someone
he's a
who's
trickster.
yeah, he's abusing the situation, right? Like,
Yeah, yeah, it's just so funny. Like when he's was making his comeback, and he was like, "I
mhm.
have this academy and things like that." It's like, become like me. Give me $8,000 so you can be like me. And it's like, dude, come on.
Yep.
Like part of it is sacrifice, like making a sacrifice, putting the effort in, not just for yourself, but for other people.
Hmm.
And I think that a lot of us, especially when we ascend and become more popular and influential, we forget that.
Yeah, we need to um and again, it's like you're saying above and below, but it's all these institutions that are failing at once, which is why we need to get back to these positive messages. I think it's so important because and these messages with that resonate with young people need to be provided by people um who are actually, at some level trying to do what's best for them, and it should be provided locally. So it's not something that virtue isn't something you necessarily are going to be able to learn on the internet. I mean, if it's you might get some clues there, but just like that wrestling with God, like the real character, like someone actually has to interact with you in your life to actually for you to actually try and exemplify these virtues and learn these
Well,
virtues.
courage is a habit.
Hmm. Yeah, courage is the habit.
And I mean, it can help if someone, if your parents teach you, courage, and you see it, in your family, with your family members and things like that, but you also have to do it yourself. And it is scary. You do have to have faith that you're not going to be trampled on when you perform an act of courage. Um, yeah, it's a leap of faith. Luckily, we're still in a time and place where people can be courageous and people will be rewarded for their courage. But
Hmm.
I don't know how much time we have for that. Like,
I don't know.
I don't want to be a doomer, but things will get more difficult as, a lot of people don't want to give up their
Comfort.
wealth, their comfort, their wealth, and things like that. And it's like, I'm sorry, but if you want a better world for your children, you're gonna have to make some sort of sacrifice, either your
Yes,
time,
sacrifices are
your
critical.
money,
Hmm.
your, maybe some years at the end of your life because, sleepless nights or whatever. It's gonna
Hmm.
be some sort of sacrifice. And I would rather that you choose the sacrifice that you make instead of that being forced upon you.
Yeah. Well, I mean, because well, if it's forced upon you, it's not really a sacrifice. Then it's theft or tragedy. I don't know if sacrifice is the right word. Once
Yeah, it's not
it's
a sacrifice. You just
yeah,
become resentful at what you've lost at that point.
yeah, or
It
yeah,
becomes theft.
tragedy.
Yeah.
Yeah, or disaster,
But
crisis. I don't know. Yeah, there's different words you could use.
so there's a saying um, in Cuban culture, aprende a paliza. You learn by getting smacked with a stick or getting smacked sometimes. And
Hmm.
in the weird analogy, I was watching the scene from Age of Ultron where Tony Stark fights the Hulk in his huge Hulkbuster armor.
Yeah.
And if you look at that scene at first, he's sort of playing along with him. He's like, "Oh, come on, like, don't hit me here and don't do
Hmm.
this." But there's one part in the middle of everything where you see Tony Stark, it's for just 1 second, where he goes, and he's like, "Oh my God, I can actually die from this."
Hmm.
And then that's when he realizes, "Oh my God," like he starts getting desperate, and he has to take drastic measures. And I think in a way that's what's happening to us in the United States. We're just we have such a severe normalcy bias that we think whatever we do will be fine, everything will be good,
Yeah.
inflation will not occur. And then we saw the the like the beginnings, the shock waves of COVID and the after
Hmm.
effects of that and the inflation that occurred. It's like, hey, don't be too confident.
Yep.
Society is fragile. Be careful.
Yep.
Like
We're
you
getting the
have to guard
warnings,
this. And
the
if we don't heed
harbingers.
them,
Yeah. If you can turn the ship around. But I think that, yeah, that's the way we turn the ship away around as we start having these conversations. It's great talking to you, Angel. There's two things I like to say at the end of every episode, but I'll let you just say your goodbyes first.
no, likewise, Xander. It's been great talking to you. Is it okay if I sort of promote where you can find me?
Oh, yeah, yeah, absolutely do that. Yeah,
Yeah, I'm on YouTube, Rumble, and Twitter at the Blaitaga. It's pretty much the same name
okay.
in all of them. I mostly use Twitter, but I have to. I just started with this whole thing, so there's a lot of maintenance and figuring out what I'm going to do and really what I'm going to say and things like that, or
Mhm.
like where I'm going to go because I sort of just said my piece and then people are now looking at me and I'm like, oh, okay, time for the next act. I don't know.
Yeah.
My one thing I want to do, it will take me a few months, is I am writing a book on how parents can defend themselves and their kids on woke ideology in schools and how to sort of fight back against what teachers do, like create false echo chambers with, as I
Hmm.
said before, and how to deal with an institution that overloads the students with rules and things like that. Just kind of like a little guidebook on a how-to kind of thing.
Hmm.
Um, but that's sort of my deal is I want parents to take control over their kids' educations and actually put some time in it because that's one of the easily top three most important things you can do as a parent is raise your kids and teach your kids the right values and make sure that they keep the values that you want to
Yeah,
teach them. That's really important.
that's
And
cool.
I just want to make that more possible.
Yeah, and have those conversations with your kids at that time. I think that's key too, is that you have these conversations. But it's awesome. I'll make sure that the links are in the descriptions to these things too, so people can find you there.
Yeah, Xander,
Uh,
it's been a great conversation.
yeah,
Thanks.
yeah, awesome, Angel. All right, and I just like to say, people, residuum revertitur, viva Cristo Rey.